Today's episode of The Watch is brought to you by Roan Apparel. Roan is men's premium fitness apparel and activewear brand that provides gear for the modern man who demands modern style, comfort, and quality. You may have heard I've taken up golf. Sorry, America. Sorry, all of my municipal course golfers who I am screaming for at. But even if I'm not playing well, I look damn good because I'm rocking Roan Apparel when I'm out there on the course. The design is sophisticated with minimal logos, and everything is crafted using luxury tech fabrics of premium quality. But if you don't love your gear, don't worry. They offer free returns and exchanges, so you have nothing to lose. Not to mention, all orders ship free. It's time to upgrade, whether you're on the golf course, running, just chilling. Go to Roan.com, RHONE.com, and enter promo code WATCH at checkout for 20% off your first purchase. Look better while you golf.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, this is the water, this is the well, this is Andy Greenwald!
You know, longtime listeners of this podcast are familiar with your trademark introductions.
I know.
And they often guess.
What's he here with you?
I love it. This is the new space. They often wager guesses as to what it will be based on the week's pop culture, Sunday night's pop culture.
There was not a lot of variance this time.
I want you to know that I predicted this.
Yeah, you didn't even blink when I started doing that.
I knew. I loved it. I also didn't want to interrupt you.
Andy Greenwald, welcome to The Watch.
Oh, thanks, host of The Watch. All right, very formal today.
Guys, if you live in Los Angeles and you don't have a pressing family emergency on July 11th...
Generally, pressing family emergencies develop later than 2 weeks
Your
out.
attendance is expected at Largo,
Yeah.
where we will be doing Talk the Thrones Live with Mallory Rubin and Jason Concepcion.
Do the Ed Norton. I feel like Ed Norton needs everyone in Los Angeles who's a Game of Thrones fan to stand up and walk.
I need you to clear the room.
Yeah.
Get me a panic. Here's the thing. There will be special guests. You get to see me, Andy, Jason, and Mallory talk about Game of Thrones. 2 of the 4 people know what they're talking about in that group.
Mm-hmm. Could be any 2 at any time.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I really encourage you guys to come out July 11th at Largo. You can buy tickets through SeatGeek. We will tweet out the information. We want to see your happy, smiling faces.
Yeah, we want to mingle.
Yeah.
I also...
Peak TV isn't anything without its audience.
I also want people to know that I believe John Bryan is producing the show.
Yeah.
I want
Did
classic...
I forget to mention that?
Classic...
Beck's playing all of Vultures.
I want classic Largo vibes.
Yeah.
I want Patton
It's
Oswalt
you,
doing
me,
stand-up in
Fiona
between.
Apple.
Amy Mann. Is that weird that I have nostalgia for like early Largo dinner theater? I think it's moved. It's not even in the same place now. It's a bigger space.
Yeah.
So we will not be serving dinner.
No,
Did you ever have dinner at the old Largo?
No, I didn't.
A lot of spaghetti.
I didn't. I love the halibut. Greenwald.
Hey, Ben.
We're going to
Hey,
talk,
buddy.
obviously, about one of the most transgressive, boundary-pushing, thought-provoking through the back of my head because a demon homeless man has my skull crushed in his hand.
Ray Donovan is back.
It's on the same network as Ray Donovan.
I love the opening where they're like, if you like this head fuckery, why not watch John Voight ham it up?
Here's William Macy drinking castor oil.
Just out there, just drinking.
Okay, is it castor oil or castrol oil?
Castor oil is a thing that it's like it's like a thing that makes ipecac, makes you have
Castor
a reaction.
Oil. Okay, we're gonna leave that in.
There's petrol. There's Castro. There's
I
Fidel
gotcha.
Castro.
Yeah, I'll get you. Okay.
Did you read about what they did to the Buena Vista Social Club documentary sequel? So much stuff happened in the movie business.
Yeah, that's a good segue. We're going to talk about Twin Peaks. We're going to talk about Glow.
Glow! So excited.
But first, we're going to just run through a little bit of these hot Hollywood tabloid headlines because I personally cannot get enough of this Han Solo story. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's just so exciting. I love all the players. I love all the the little side stories that are coming out of it. I love reading between the lines.
Look, last week we talked a little bit of the Han Solo stuff. We started talking about it.
Yeah.
And Sean Fennessy was here. My child was in the room as well, so we were a little distracted. You didn't give the people your biggest take that you had previewed.
I did.
For me.
You just kept. I think you had to keep getting up. I sort of gave it.
You gave it in a polite way.
Yeah.
But you are team Kathy Kennedy.
My team, I don't think these dudes were right for the job in the first place. Okay. I don't think that if you're like Kathleen Kennedy was like, I want to make what essentially amounted to Rio Bravo. I want to make like a Western with Frederick Remington painting primary colors, and it's going to be cool.
Yeah.
But like, this is the same line that we heard before Rogue One, where she was like, let's do Zero Dark, like where Gareth Edwards was like, well, I'm going to make Zero Dark 30, but in Star Wars. I want to make a war movie.
Lord and Miller are like, what if it was Star Wars, but also Men in Black?
Yeah. What if we took this great script and didn't use it? So look, I think what they do works for what they do.
Here's the latest news. It was in the dueling stories in the trades today.
Yes, with different angles.
Different angles. The main takeaway appears to be that the problems were more systemic. I mean, obviously they were more systemic. Obviously this didn't just happen. Among the people being thrown under the largest school bus in the galaxy are star Alden Ehrenreich, who's accused of not being good at acting.
Yes, and they had bringing to hire a, quote, Ace Ventura-esque sensibility to the character.
Interesting. Understand that when... I believe when the first Star Wars film was released, Alden Ehrenreich was...
I did read that on a website called StarWarsWithAZ.net.
When the first Star Wars was released, A New Hope, Alden Ehrenreich, I believe, was negative 15 years old.
Yeah.
So his connection to the source material may be suspect.
Okay, anyone but it's not like he has to go into the sept to study the scroll.
This is not playing Daniel Plainview, okay? Like, this is not that. He wears a cool jacket and he shoots lasers in space. Like, let's. Also, anyone who saw Hail Caesar knows this kid is good. This kid is funny and talented, so I'm not buying that.
So we've got here's a rap story that's basically like Ehrenreich was a bit of the problem, right? That they were concerned that they hired an acting coach for him in production. It is not uncommon to have an acting coach work with someone before or maybe in the early stages of production, but to bring someone on late in the game, like it's like switching caddies on the ninth hole.
Wow.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
It really goes deep with you now.
I've never had a caddy. So that's one side of things, right? The other side of things that was reported in the Hollywood Reporter is that Lawrence Kasdan wrote this great script. They did a very good job at talking about how great this Lawrence Kasdan script was very early on. I remember there was like a Slash Film post that was just like, this is the best Star Wars script. And apparently, Lord and Miller, according to this story, were doing things like shouting out one-liners like it was the 40-year-old fucking virgin and being like, try this one, try this one. And that
is the Apatow Adam McKay style. You shout alts, you find the jokes as you're filming.
Right. That's why also those movies tend to not be like entirely coherent dramatic experiences.
Let me be clear with you. The third act of Trainwreck, featuring LeBron James, Marva Albert, and Amy Schumer becoming a good person because she gives her booze to a homeless man, worked perfectly. That's not the kind of thing you can find in the editing room. Right. That's scripted.
So the story in the Reporter is that Kasdan started seeing dailies.
Wait, can I just say my favorite part of all these stories?
Yeah.
Lawrence Kasdan, just eminence grease of Hollywood, apparently was watching dailies on his laptop or whatever from his home in Pacific Palisades.
Yeah.
This dude's life has really changed in the last 5 years.
It's no shots.
No, this guy
He wrote Dreamcatcher.
This guy is super talented. Always has been.
Yes.
Has been involved in the Star Wars movies from the beginning.
Raiders.
The Big Chill.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy makes movies. Grand fucking Canyon.
Yeah. Kevin Kline discovers what's really important in life.
Steve Martin wets himself because he gets shot.
Get me?
Oh, I see. Sorry, let's come back to that. Look, I'm seriously no shots. This guy's terrific. But it's interesting that for all of the attempts for Lucasfilm to be like, it's still called Lucasfilm, but George is gone and it's new blood and they're bringing in, for a new era of Star Wars movies, they're bringing in new talent. The person who has emerged in many ways as the most crucial member of the team is Kasdan. And the amount of power he seems to be exerting, or that they keep begging him to take on, is really something.
Yeah, we talked about this on Thursday. There is a recurring theme throughout these Star Wars movies, and there was a recurring theme, and still to some extent is. If you look at David Duchovny leaving Black Panther, there is an initial interest on the side of the studio and the producers to work with quote-unquote edgy new talent with a distinctive vision and a distinctive voice. And you bring them in, and then you need them to start playing ball in terms of Chris Miller. Like, I don't mind Lord and Miller's style. Like, that works for them. But it's not a Lego movie. You can't fix it. Like, you're not drawing into it. So if those guys decide to throw out a line that could alter Star Wars canon. I think one thing we're seeing here is that these movies are too interconnected. Somebody on our Slack today was like, I think Cam was actually saying, like, I just wanted like a cool Han Solo movie with jokes and Wookiees. But they can't do that. It has to have some sort of tissue stretching out.
I think that's absolutely part of it. But I also think that the real divide here is between the two adjectives you use, which is new and edgy. Those are not always the same thing.
That's very, very smart.
Thanks, man. Yeah. What I mean to say is, who comes in to fix these movies? Tony Gilroy, Ron Howard.
Old hands.
These guys
safe pair hands.
Are major talents.
Yes.
These are not hacks by any stretch of the imagination. What they need are people who know how to make big budget movies or write big budget scripts.
That's what I was saying. Like, I was like, these movies probably need to find their David Yates. For as much as I want them to be like Rian Johnson exploring his Looper verse, like I know that.
But let's talk about, you mentioned Rian Johnson. I'm glad you did, because one of the other takeaway lines that was worth repeating from these trade stories was Rian Johnson appears to have had no speed bumps whatsoever delivering The Last Jedi. And the reason is Rian Johnson has been writing and directing movies, gradually scaling up in his movies.
He's also written the movie that he's directing.
That's exactly right. But he was allowed to do it because he basically staged up to do that. He started making a small movie like Brick.
He wasn't coming off Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Nor was he coming off the Book of Henry, Jurassic World, and the
Safety Not Guaranteed.
Yeah. I would have real concerns about Episode 9 unless the book on Trevorrow now is just he's competent.
Yeah.
He's a hole puncher. Because and again, this is completely sight unseen of anything, but this is what we're talking about. It's a young filmmaker with complete control over vision. I mean, that's what, like, Shane Carruth, right? Like, that's like, you're not going to hire him to do Star Wars, though, because he's not going to do it the way you want him to do it. These people are trying to have it both ways, and I think that's where that's where this stuff falls apart.
I think it's just been fascinating to read all these stories about the production, because you can see which ones are coming sort of from the Lord and Miller side of things. There's a piece in the Hollywood Reporter story about when the crew was told that Ron Howard would be taking over, they broke out into applause.
That's a shitty leak. That's a weird thing.
So it's been a rough week for that franchise. And one of the things, I think that this is probably, I would say, across like consensus most popular Star Wars character.
Yeah.
So it'll be fascinating to see whether they are able to get this right.
And what's not just the most popular Star Wars character, I would argue the most crucial Star Wars character, because the biggest problem with the prequels wasn't that the Jedi were intergalactic tax collectors.
They were not funny.
Is that there was no Han Solo.
Yeah.
You need someone being like, for real?
This is stupid.
This is stupid.
Yeah,
you need that. And, that's the key to almost any adventure storytelling, is you need the sarcastic voice of the audience being like, really? Are you sure you're going to do that now?
There's also, before we move on, there's like this incredible thread that goes through almost all of the stories. And I really, really like Gareth Edwards, his movies a lot. And I thought Rogue One was really cool in a lot of ways. But every one of these stories is like, there's like, sources say Gareth Edwards is a jamoke who let Kathleen Kennedy suplex his movie in front of him while Tony Gilroy sang Real American.
And said, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
May I have some more,
That's what's so weird.
Yeah.
I mean,
where they're like, like Lord Miller just didn't get it. Yeah.
Everything that is released, whether it's released officially in a press release or leaked semi-officially to the Hollywood Reporter or Variety, is dipped in a sealant coat of bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true. So this thing that when they released joint statements, and the thing in this piece about how Ron Howard felt concerned about taking over the franchise, but has been trading emails with Lord and Miller, and they've been lovely. I mean, whatever. Ron Howard, by all accounts, really is that guy, really is a nice guy. I'm sure he did have concerns.
Right.
I'm sure those
There's
concerns...
just so many great parallels between the actual story of Star Wars, of like rebellions and empire, and like these like edgy, like these voices who are trying to like make themselves heard, versus like the Disney studio system that is like, look, this is $1 billion industry. We are working billions.
I just think that if you want to play in this sandbox, you are likely going to get flattened, and you're going to look up a few months later and say, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
What did I just do? What did I just take part in? And to me, the saddest part of that story, and I'm not saying the saddest part of the story because Lord and Miller are the next Coen brothers, was that, they could always fall back into directing The Flash because that's open for them.
Right.
It's like, wow.
They'll be fine. Those guys have like 900 shows on. Andy, this is a really good week for Hollywood trades.
You love being in the biz.
A couple weeks ago, you kind of threw out a little bit of a Greenwald bat signal. What is your bat signal? Do you know?
You mean what does it look like?
Yeah, like what's your icon? Your sort of your symbol.
Wow. I feel like that's best left. I mean, what would you think it is? I would imagine that it's very faint because I don't send it out very often, and very few people see it.
The Hollywood Reporter last night, with the season finale of Silicon Valley, put up an interview with TJ Miller. Now, a couple weeks ago, you had asked basically for this. Yeah. You were like, if anybody knows the real deal behind TJ Miller leaving this show, holler.
Yeah.
And you didn't need to do that because TJ Miller is like, I'm happy to share.
By the way, tip line, inbox 0 on that. So thanks a lot, sources.
This is one of the great Q&As I've seen in a long time.
Can we begin at the end where it says the above interview has been edited and condensed for clarity?
Can't believe that.
Good luck with that, THR.
Here are some of my favorites. So basically, TJ Miller was like, if you subscribe to his version of reality, he was asked to take a lesser role on the show to cycle down to
was offered
3 to 5 episodes because he was so busy. And they were like, hey, man, you're amazing. Why don't you work less?
Or they were like, you seem real busy.
Yeah, right. And he was like, cool, I'm off the show now.
Forever.
Yeah.
And will never come back.
He seemed to have there's a disconnect between what he wanted and what Alec Berg, who I think ran the show for a few years, but is still the showrunner, and Clay Tarver, who was in the band Chavez, who I love,
he was.
who was also working on the show, and Mike Judge, who's sort of in charge of the show. And TJ Miller claims that Mike Judge and Clay Tarver were like, please stay, and that Alec Berg, he just doesn't like Alec Berg. He straight up just says, I don't like Alec.
Yeah.
There are so many great quotes in this. I wanted to read you a few.
Yeah.
When asked about like sort of, what are you going to do with the people who loved you on this show? And he's just like, although that makes for a terrible time at the airport because everybody high fives me grabbing your ass on the way to your fucking plane to Omaha, Nebraska to do stand-up comedy, these people want to know, quote, do you really want to walk away from what many would say is the cushiest situation in television, the platinum age of television, which I don't know if is like his shot at golden age being over, or he just thinks that's what we called the golden age.
I think he's just squeezed another mind grape in that
I
moment.
also really, really liked, I'm doing a lot as a public servant and jester to the American public.
Yeah.
As Kristen Stewart always says, it's worldwide. It's worldwide. FYI, guys, I Googled, quote,
did you?
Kristen Stewart, close quote, it's worldwide, close quote. First result, this fucking interview. That's the only time that has ever come up.
First of all, false. She's just never said it in public. She says this on their group Slack of talented, misunderstood geniuses.
Yeah. Anyway, when you get a chance to read this, it's Hollywood Reporter. We can tweet it out. It's just an incredible interview.
It's very rare. A moment ago I said things are dipped in bullshit. This is clearly not, except it's just soaked within its own subjective bullshit.
Yeah.
One takeaway is that Zach Woods, apparently sweetest guy in the world, greatest improviser. Kumail comes off great.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone comes off great.
He puts Middleditch in the middle of a ditch, though.
Yeah, he buries him in that ditch.
But I mean, like,
there are a lot of comments about how
imagine, to be completely candid, imagine having to deal with this every day, though.
Well, I think let's also be honest. Most TV shows, certainly sitcoms with comedians or big egos in the cast, this is what it is going to work. These people are not friends. Very rarely they're friends. Sometimes they are. But generally, you have competing egos, and the job, and the very difficult job of the people like Alec Berg and Clay Tarver and Mike Judge have, a very well-paying job, is to manage those egos and deal with it. So for TJ Miller to come out and say, I've never wanted to be a star, unlike Thomas Middleditch, who wants to be the star of the show, and now he can finally be the star of the show. I mean, it makes for great copy.
Yeah.
The truth is, none of this really matters. I think Silicon Valley is probably better with him on it because he's very funny. It's a weird choice, but he seems dedicated to making weird choices. And the only thing that really had me scratching my head in this interview is when he's just like, finally, I'm free to hang glide into Paris for the premiere of the Emoji Movie, which is going to be the next funny thing.
He seems to be very appreciative of his role in destroying, like, American intellectual culture. So good for him. I did not get a chance to see this episode of Silicon Valley, so we can report back at a later date about that.
Last thing before we get to TV?
Yeah, sure.
How do you feel about the smoking wreckage of the Transformers franchise?
Oh, yeah. Sheesh. I haven't seen this one yet.
Wow, you're missing a lot apparently.
Well, apparently I am. Apparently it has already achieved a certain cult status among people who are just like, Anthony Hopkins is great in this, and it's like completely nonsensical.
Stanley Tucci plays Merlin.
So I'm in, but I just haven't had a chance to go yet. And now it's like, this is going to be. I would like to have Sean come back on to talk about this, the Box Office Whisperer, because it does seem like this is a movie made exclusively for foreign markets now.
Yeah, and Sean had a good piece about that.
Yeah,
about how they're not going to make good bad movies anymore because movies just have to sort of exist, which is so demeaning.
Have you seen any Transformers
to
movies?
people in the other parts of the world that I guess are still paying for these tickets? I've seen very, very noisy bits over time.
Did you ever see the Shia LaBeouf video where he's like, go, 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 go? It's like every time he says go in these movies. It's a good video. Cool YouTube clip.
I was communicating with a director that we're friendly with.
Sources say.
I know, who we respect as a director.
Okay.
Who basically blames the wreckage of modern cinema at the adrenalized feat of Michael Bay. Basically, he's responsible for most of the evil in the multiplex.
Hard to disagree.
Particularly, well, he also predicted that you would say that. That's true. I wanted to just get your thoughts on that because I think that there is a proud ignorance and incoherence in his movies that has only escalated.
I can't tell if that's a compliment or not.
Well, this is the argument about Michael Bay. That I think you can say has infected blockbuster filmmaking because one of the things we always say about these franchises is that at a certain point they just devolve into nonsense punching.
I don't think that actually happens that much in non-Transformers Michael Bay movies.
Oh, like his quiet films?
No, but I don't think that...
Michael Bay's Summer Hours, one for them, one for us.
The Rock and Armageddon don't have a lot of like, and now two robots will fight on the sun.
No, Armageddon was just about a man literally fucking an asteroid to death by planting a nuclear bomb inside of it.
No, it was about fathers and sons and daughters.
What's the difference? It was about animal crackers. I thought that was worthwhile. I mean, my feeling about Michael Bay is that when Bad Boys came out, when we were in high school, or seniors in high school,
I guess, yeah.
That was a very important film for me.
Yeah.
I thought it was dazzling and fun. I loved it.
Yeah.
Taylor Leone was great in it.
The way you're saying it, it's like, I saw it at Film Forum.
Yeah, I saw it at the Quad Cinema.
Yeah. After an early afternoon yee-yee.
But here's the thing. I just feel, here's my thought about Michael Bay, and then you can defend him if you want before we move on. I just feel like, from what I gather, crystal meth is fun for people the first time. That's my feeling about Michael Bay. You know what I mean? It just feels like it's just kind of a cheap, ugly high that works the first time and doesn't age well. That's my feeling about it. And it makes me glad that people seem to have moved past it because he just seems pretty despicable all around, and I cheer his failure. How about
that? Really enjoy his movies. I think he's one of the great visual stylists, like in terms of being able to create...
In terms of American flags rustling in the wind. I
am not a really moral movie viewer. You know that.
I wasn't saying that in a political sense, although that's a whole other conversation.
Right. I don't really ascribe a lot of... I understand what you're saying.
You're not moral on the links either, from what I gather.
No, I'm a savage. Gosh, you know, I mean, I know it's hard to. He's spent so much of this decade on these Transformers movies.
He's made 5 of them.
Yeah, I know. And the one before
They're
that
about toys.
Was The Island, which was not that good. But I really, I think Pain and Gain is a different kind of movie. I don't know. I think that it would take a long time to sort of explain it. But like in terms of directing set pieces, is in terms of communicating visceral energy through camera work, through cutting. He's incredibly groundbreaking, and in a lot of ways, like a lot of his moves have been stolen by other people, like Zack Snyder, and the way in which you can almost make like I'm not saying that in a good or bad way. I'm saying that value neutral. Like I just think that you're right. His style has permeated blockbuster filmmaking in a way that it's hard to recognize the value in the original.
Right.
But I think that he is an incredible visual stylist. I mean, you know, and I just think that he chooses to make shitty material. But I think when he's working with stuff that's like right at the right level of like not too self-serious, has a bunch of good actors having a good time, and allows him to do insane shit like have F-16s fly over Nicolas Cage as he stabs himself with an anti-poison vaccine, like that's dope.
I I enjoyed that movie at the time.
The Rock is awesome.
I just
The
want to
Rock
say,
is a really good movie.
my experience watching The Rock, which I feel like I've talked about on this podcast before, at the Marple 10 movie theater outside of Philly, matinee with some women who really felt invested in the film to the degree of speaking out loud, like really speaking back to the film. And their commentary during the Sean Connery haircut scene lives with me to this day. They really had an opinion about and I must say, not disclosed in the script, but about the sexuality of the person doing the haircutting of Sean Connery.
Oh, interesting.
They had a lot of thoughts about his proclivities, his background, his interests, and they shared them very loudly.
Okay.
So I remember that. So that's my thought about Michael Bay films.
All right.
Wait, last thing.
Oh, gosh.
About this. Remember when we were talking with Sean last week and we talked about the experience of watching Jackass 2 or Borat and feeling like it was something so like hysterically new? Mm-hmm. I wonder I was going to ask you, and I think I have an answer about what is next for action filmmaking, because the Michael Bay thing, as you're right, has filtered in. It's now part of the culture and it's been done.
I think that the language that he introduced actually became the language of superhero movies.
The shaky cam of Paul Greengrass has become kind of overdone, and it has just sort of been factored into other people's filmmaking. Is the next one, and I wish it were so, is it Edgar Wright? And we'll see Baby Driver.
No.
I don't think anyone else can do that. But it's just in terms of seeing a kinetic camera movement and action and, seeing something new in that genre is what is next.
I think the newest thing was Gareth Evans, who directed the two Raid movies.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that's like just the most extreme version of it. I don't know how those movies are legal to be made. I don't know how anyone survived making them.
Yeah.
It's just like watching... I don't know. Those movies are the most extreme action movies I can remember seeing. What's next for the genre? I think that there will automatically be I think that in some ways I don't necessarily call Logan an action movie, but the way in which Logan dealt with action set pieces and the drama and the action and the drama within the action as like almost a Western with these sort of very still vistas. And kind of was, for the most part, a very clearly told movie. I do think that there might be a desire or yearning for clarity, which is not Michael Bay's forte in the Transformers movies. So we'll see. I think that could be it. Okay, finally, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Yes. We're going to come back and talk about Twin Peaks and Glow. Hey guys, today's episode of The Watch is also brought to you by Spotify. Did you know that The Watch is available on Spotify? I can't believe it. I got mad playlists for you, but now I got mad podcasts for you. Andy and I have always been talking about Spotify, where we got our playlists for your barbecues, for the Meet Me in the Bathroom book, whatever. It's just really cool to finally be on the service. It's my favorite music service. Yes, the streaming service that you know and love for music is also fully loaded with podcasts, and you can hear The Watch and a bunch of other podcasts from the Ringer family. Find us in the podcast section within the Browse tab when you're using Spotify on mobile, or just by searching The Watch. While you're there, click to follow us and have your new episodes delivered right into your Spotify library. Head to spotify.com/podcasts for more. That's spotify.com/podcasts. Today's episode of The Watch is brought to you by Hotel Tonight. If you are like me and you are not so great at planning ahead, I've got great news for you. There is an awesome app called Hotel Tonight that helps you find amazing hotel deals at the last minute. It sounds counterintuitive, but unlike flights, hotel rates usually get cheaper at the last minute, and Hotel Tonight helps hotels sell their unsold rooms, allowing them to pass those deals along to you. These aren't last resort places. They're actually cool, top-rated hotels that you would actually want to stay in. And with so many awesome partner hotels in a ton of different countries, Hotel Tonight can help you find a great hotel almost anywhere. It's the perfect thing for a spontaneous getaway or finally going on that trip that you want to take for such a long time. I know personally that, if I ever want to take a staycation in LA, I want to get out to the beach or whatever, I just jam Hotel Tonight. I'm like, let's do this. 10 seconds, 3 taps and a swipe. Even though the app's name is Hotel Tonight, you can book up to a week in advance, and all it takes, 10 seconds, 3 taps and a swipe. Get in on these killer last minute deals and download the Hotel Tonight app now. All right, Andy, we are back. Last night, I think was, it's hard because now that everything is so kind of fractured. Like I don't think that there is like we don't have like the monocultural conversation that I feel like we
Not for a
did
couple more weeks.
Yeah, right.
When Thrones is back.
That we had say 4 or 5 years ago, or when Thrones is on, or whatever. But to the extent that there is one, and that is to the extent that people have hung with this show through a couple of weeks of real like idiosyncratic television, we were somewhat, if you want to call it a reward, we were rewarded last night with really one of the most breathtaking things I can ever remember being broadcast on my television.
Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
We're talking about Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
I am so excited to talk about this. I did want to start by saying something bigger because we're going to talk about Glow also, which is the new show on Netflix that premiered on Friday. And the combination, I watched episodes 3 and 4 of Glow last night, and I watched episode, I think it's 8 of Twin Peaks. And I went to bed so happy, so like high on the possibilities of TV as a medium, because one of the things that I've been sensing in the last year or so, and I say this as a consumer and fan, and also attempting to work behind the scenes as well, there does seem to be a real collision course between doing the traditional things that TV has always done well and doing them well, or finding kind of a new way to sing the same songs, right? And breaking ground and being groundbreaking. And, my favorite show of this year still is probably The Young Pope, which couldn't give a shit about TV, basically, or the conventions of it. So I may be a hypocrite by saying this, but I found the combination of these shows so thrilling in 2 completely contradictory directions that it made me feel very excited about the health of it. Because Glow, and we'll talk about this second, is instantly and brilliantly such a celebration of everything that we love TV for, but updated to a framework and a context that feels contemporary, even though it is itself a period piece. By episode 3, you're like, hey, my pals are back. I can't wait to see what my pals do. I mean, that's always TV. That's Cheers. That's MASH. But yet we're watching something that is strikingly feminist, strikingly intelligent in terms of its emotional delivery and content, and binging on Netflix and about wrestling lady wrestling in the 80s. And then in Twin Peaks, we have this hour that is more out there than most cinema, and works brilliantly on a number of levels, because we can, and I you tell me how you want to talk about this, because we can talk about it just as pure art, because I think it functions that way, as pure cinematic art. But it's also an origin story for an old character.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about.
We can talk about how the reason Twin Peaks and David Lynch gets away with this, as if he's a bank robber, I don't even like that terminology, is everything that he does on Twin Peaks, and honestly, I would argue in his movies, but you could, maybe he lost you with the rabbits in Inland Empire or whatever. But certainly within the season of Twin Peaks, operates on 2 levels. The one level is, what the fuck? What am I seeing? What is he doing to me? Why? And the other level is, oh, well, there's an evil spirit.
Yeah, Noel Murray had a piece in the Times. There's been some really great writing. Noel did a great piece. Sean Collins wrote a great piece for Rolling Stone. Allison wrote a great piece for The Ringer about this episode. But one thing that Noel got out was this idea that he was like, I know that I might just be in the Twin Peaks canyon right now, and like I'm just so immersed in this, but that episode didn't seem that opaque to me.
That's the brilliance.
So I think that there's a difference between demanding and challenging and nonsensical. And we basically experienced an atomic unearthing of an elemental evil and a birth of a counterbalancing good, hopefully, or for the sake of the people on the show, I guess, if that's my read of it is vaguely correct.
Yes.
Told while Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima is playing, and we're traveling through the heart of an atomic explosion.
Side note, that music that was playing, that's essentially what my father would be listening to when I would...
Really?
When I would remember like a couple times you'd like drop me off after we'd be hanging out in Philly or whatever.
He would be listening to...
He would be awake at like 12:30 a.m. That's what would be playing in my home. So that is like, okay, it felt very familiar to me.
That's why you like pop music.
It was like, it was basically like, that was my Rosebud.
We've spent a lot of time over this last year or so, especially talking about like Westworld, talking about Leftovers, what is happening in this show, and evaluating how showrunners choose to tip hands, leave clues, stick landings for lack. I hate that phrase now, but tie up loose ends. And I was watching the explosion scene last night, and I was thinking back to the week before of David Lynch whistling in front of the atomic explosion, and it just becomes kind of clear to me that the Blue Rose cases are based around
the Blue Rose cases being Gordon Cole, the whatever he is, deputy head of the FBI's symbol for cases that are otherworldly, spiritual, that relate to the Black Lodge.
Right. And I don't know. It gave me an overwhelming sense of calm because I was just like, it's just so gratifying to know that someone is so good at making something. Does that make any sense?
Yes, here's the thing you have to remember about David Lynch. He's not kidding.
Yeah.
He loves 1950s things. He loves good and evil. He made a movie about a man riding a tractor. There was not a subtext to that, right? And so people think he's mocking or meta or undercutting
or messing around
the 1950s veneer.
This is just like clearing out all the stuff that he's been kind of thinking about.
Believes in good and evil
in
a very primal kind of way and always has. Dale Cooper is the ultimate Boy Scout, and Bob is this embodiment of evil. That's always been the show. And Noel Murray mentions this in his piece in a way, and I think it's worth saying again. You can watch this show and say an evil spirit was born from the nuclear test and then inhabited a good guy, and then the good guy had to fight his way back to win. But what a boring way to look at it. We've seen that story. We've never seen it told this way.
Yeah.
But you can do that. That is the guardrail as he descends down into Dante's Inferno here with the storytelling.
Right.
So there's a couple things worth talking about. One is I do want to give this show and to give David Lynch and Mark Frost an enormous amount of credit for a very old-fashioned TV thing, which is you got to make do, right? Like the thing about TV that has always interested me is that it's imperfect. You can't get it right or you can't have everything work out, so you got to adjust. This season, this improbable return season, has been marred by so much, by so many things outside of their control. The force of evil, Killer Bob, was played by a set decorator named Frank Silva, who died in the 90s. He is not available to be in this show, so they've had to reconsider how they will portray him. They've used his face, right? They've the same thing. The Michael J. Anderson, who played the little man, either didn't want to come back or wasn't available, so they created that weird talking tree. Michael Onkine didn't want to come back, so Robert Forster is there playing his brother, and he has these long phone conversations with the character who's not there. They're making do. At the same time, there's this deep well of humanity because some other people, a weird number of actors actually, passed away since they filmed their parts. Catherine Coulson, who played the log lady, Warren Frost, who played Dr. Hayward, and Miguel Ferrer, who plays Albert and is probably still going to be in it more. There are so many things that are just like, let's get this done and figure out the best way to do it, that I find very heartwarming. It seems very old-fashioned to me. Then, let's look at the nuts and bolts of what we saw last night,
sure.
Okay? Then we should get into the art of it. For people who watched, and I recommend you do, it's available on Showtime, the prequel movie, we met David Bowie's character, Philip Jeffries.
I really want to ask you about this.
Yeah.
So, I love Firewalk with Me, but I wanted to ask you, as somebody who read the book that is sort of the connective tissue.
I've read all the books.
And can you tell me, so talk to me like I'm a baby here. Explain Philip, because Philip is also somebody that Ray calls in the car when
and apparently Evil Cooper had been in touch with Philip.
Okay.
So what we learned in the movie was that Philip Jeffries, played by David Bowie, was an FBI agent under Gordon Cole's control.
They had come up together, right?
And apparently, I think he was a little older, but he had been investigating similar cases and he had gone missing. He appears basically unstuck in time in Philadelphia to tell a story. And the story he basically tells them is that he says he found them. And when he's talking about them, he's talking about these evil spirits. He's talking about Bob and Mike. And he says they lived above a convenience store. In last night's episode, we saw a convenience store, a haunted, disturbing convenience store that was apparently in the blast zone of this nuclear thing. And that there they collect people's pain and sorrow. And he then vanished and blinked out of existence. So he's been referred to, he's been around.
He's come up a couple of times in this series.
Which is amazing because, once again, he's passed away. So he won't be in it, but he is haunting it. David Lynch is not contemptuous of the canon that he did create. You know, this is all part of it. So what we're seeing here is this larger mythology. In the cut flashbacks to the convenience store in the movie, there are people, including character actor Jürgen Prochnow, who I didn't even remember was in it, as weird bearded figures sitting behind Bob, and I believe Mike was in that scene. And in the credits of the film, they're listed as the Woodsman. We now learn, as of last night, that the truly disturbing, and let me say, I have not been this kind of scared and unsettled since I was 15 years old watching the original series, as I was when one of these woodsmen walked up behind the Air Force woman in the South Dakota morgue last week. That sort of slow approach that reminded me of like The Shining, the bear suit in The Shining, where that's just something scary and you have to look at it. These woodsmen seem to be, their role has been increased, I think probably because Frank Silva is not alive, but they seem to be harbingers of this evil or associates of this evil, and they come to where it exists. And so they brought this evil Cooper back to life. They restored him. They were birthed from this atomic explosion. They live in the convenience store. So that's basically the source of all evil.
Right.
And I think that Noel Murray lays this out pretty well in this piece, that what we saw was the giant, who has always been a sort of alarm bell for good. He warned Cooper when it was happening again, when Bob killed Cousin Madeline in the first season. It was in the second season, but in the first series. He's just having a nice jazzy night with his friend in a black and white universe. An alarm bell goes off, and he goes to his man cave, his screening room, sees that this bomb has gone off, sees that something that looks like Bob has been created, goes into some sort of otherworldly trance, births golden baubles out of his head. One of them appears to contain Laura Palmer's image, who is then kissed by the lady and sent into the world.
Right.
So you could make the supposition, which he does, that Laura is somehow a force of good that could defeat Bob. And let me just say, it is not outside of the realm of possibility, although it is not the point of this show, that what David Lynch is doing with this 25-year-long game is undoing the damage done by the broken dead girl theory. That the most interesting, sexy woman is dead in the first frame of a show, and saying that, in fact, Laura Palmer is the hero of the story.
Right.
The first thing we saw this season was Cooper in the lodge being told to find Laura again. So somehow this spirit, it might come back, and she might be restored to primacy in her own story. All this is possible, but also none of that matters, because look at what we saw.
And also, let's just talk briefly about what he's doing. I don't know how much television David Lynch watched.
I think very little.
Although I wouldn't be surprised to find out he really likes How I Met Your Mother. You know what I mean? I am obsessed with his obsession with the 1950s as this era that both reflected the platonic ideal of American existence and the absolute nadir of it. Like the idea that we could create a world-destroying weapon and that there could be all this darkness underneath this veneer of cool diners and My Prayer playing over radios after on chaste first dates and mechanics and this vision of America where everything kind of just like was this beautiful gleaming machine and underneath is this disgusting rot. I love that is become more and more clear. And it's fascinating to me that he's still able to deal with like contemporary South Dakota or, the vagaries of like the FBI. But that's still obviously the lens through which he views even the modern world. So I don't know whether he watches television or not, but he has this motif that he's working in. But he also just decides to put a Nine Inch Nails performance in the middle of the episode.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone came out of this episode thinking that there was a long, sonically adventurous shot that would take longtime fans out of the show and say, I don't know if this is for me anymore, let me tell you something. It wasn't the bomb. It was the Nine Inch Nails performance for me.
It's completely narratively unattached to anything that's happening. These performances are almost interludes.
Yes.
But this is an interlude before an incredible... It was weird. It was like watching the OC before watching a Stan Brakhage movie. It was like, oh, okay, and now like the Peach Pit, and wait, now we're going to go inside of a nuclear explosion. So that was overwhelming. I don't know what lessons people can take from this show because I don't want other people to make, here's a 6-minute mini crime drama. Now here's a music performance. Now here's an adventure into the solar system.
You can't do this.
Right.
But you are allowed to. I feel like those are the two instructions you can walk away with from this, And the reason why I started our conversation by talking about the conventional things that might be here is to say that this is part of TV. This is part of everyone's responsibility as fans and investors in this medium or creators in this medium. You have to pay attention to this because look what you can do. Look what he's doing. It's just so exhilarating and deeply disturbing. I mean, the moment when Evil Cooper is shot and these woodsmen appear, like they swarm, and there's a silent scream. I mean, this is really, really unsettling to watch for me. And similarly, that the main dude saying, you got a light, grabbing the microphone, crushing people's skulls until the black and white blood runs. This weird frog bug birthed in the sand, climbing into this sweet girl's mouth. I mean, what?
I think that the first iteration of this show, the first the first season especially, existed in this weird bubble where it was of this world but not of this world. Mm-hmm. This season feels almost disturbingly of this world. The fact, I think it's setting the South Dakota stuff especially, but even the idea that it's somewhat connected to the real happenings of this world, that we as human beings did something so anti-human as to create something that could wipe us out, and that's where evil has come from in some ways.
Yeah,
or
we're responsible for it.
We're responsible for it. It feels more deeply connected to...
Think about that first episode, the desire to sit there and watch a box for something to happen, and what will happen to you if you watch it. It's not a cynicism at all, but there is a warning in it that I think is very clear. But I also just think it's worth saying one more time, like even in the first Twin Peaks, all the stuff about Dugpas and Project Blue Book and UFOs, I mean, don't reduce this. And I say this knowing the irony of saying this as we're doing a podcast about it. But the most boring version of this show has always been whether UFOs and evil spirits, any Easter eggy show can be reduced. The great ones transcend. You mentioned Westworld. It's unfair to compare them, but my complaint about Westworld was always that it wasn't more than the sum of its Easter eggs. This is truly something, and don't overthink it. Like the Dougie stuff, there's a good man trapped. Like that's all that is.
Yeah.
And yes, it's funny. It's supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
If you think it's going on too long or it's making you uncomfortable, okay, that's what art can do to you too, especially when you're seeing a master make something.
Right.
It's really exciting, and it's off this week, which I didn't know. It's taking off the holiday weekend, which maybe we all need a break.
Yeah,
but
sure.
So that just means there's even more weeks to come. There's 11
what
more
will be
weeks.
fascinating is when it does return is I think each of these episodes, with the exception of the Dougie plotline, which has been pretty consistent, there's been a lot of stopping and starting with narrative threads. There's been a lot of stopping and starting with tones. So it'll be very interesting to see how much we continue. Like we end with a bug crawling into a little girl's throat. So where do we go from there? Do we continue with this origin story, backstory? Do we jump back to South Dakota? Do we jump to Twin Peaks? Like what happens next? I'm really excited to find out. We spent a lot of time talking about Twin Peaks. We can go into much more depth about Glow at some point down the line, but I did want to talk a little bit about this because for as sort of mind-breaking and boundary pushing as Twin Peaks is, Glow does everything that like good TV should do. Like it plays inside of a certain set of rules. There is a very obvious development of a really good ensemble, but there's something about this show that is so, like you've touched on, just goddamn lovable.
It is so charming. It does the little things so well. The pilot is so well written and constructed. The opening scene where Alison Brie is giving a monologue and they're like, "You did the man's part," is so brilliant and so low-key brilliant. The casting, the direction, the look of it, it's not too 80s. The people that they got, the way they put it together. I don't want to, it's weird to talk about it after Twin Peaks. I'm nearly as in awe of this show as I am the other one, in the way that it was done. Sidebar here about this. I watched the first 2 episodes, was delighted and charmed. My wife was away for a work trip. She came back. I said, "Do you mind? I want to watch the next 2. So she sat with me. The first one she watched is episode 3, and I won't give much away, but episode 3 pushes things a little bit more extreme. There's a robot butler. There's a party. It's a little more 80s in some ways. It's the kind of episode where I bet people will look back on, although it works in a lot of ways. When the show is in season 4 or 5, they'll be like, "That was a weird one." They were trying stuff out. She watched that. We went right into episode 4. Episode 4 ends, and her only comment was, "This is a really, really good TV show."
Yeah.
And it's not complicated. It's not that complicated.
Here's one thing I love about this show is that it's basically about TV shows. It's in so much as they've taken. It's not a sitcom, but they did a very smart thing where they have this arena, literally an arena where there's a wrestling ring, and they have all these women who are actresses who are thinking about the part that they are as a human being, as like a person, as a working actress, but they're all also playing these different roles, and they're all also peeling back layers of the onion to find out who they actually are. And like, there's this Mark Maron character who's sort of the impresario over this, who is also acting as like an acting coach and as a provocateur of their emotions. And then there are real relationships that are happening between Alison Brie and Betty Gilpin and all these other characters who are kind of like. It's just this really fascinating, almost meta conversation about it. It's very economical for the most part.
Guys, it's 30 minutes
and
each episode.
And it all takes place for the most part in one place, you know?
Let me say the other thing what they've done here. You know, when you pitch TV shows these days, like, you need your hook, you need your gimmick, you need your poster, you need your in, you know, and often it's a pre-existing piece of IP. And yes, there actually was a glow. I remember seeing it a couple times on cable. But this to me seems more like they wrote the show and then someone said, well, we could probably get the rights to it. And they said, great, we'll just put it on top to keep it buttoned up and nice. I do not understand pro wrestling. I have never understood it. I've never liked it. I never got the appeal. I never watched it for a second more than I had to. What is astounding to me about this show is that within 1 or 2 episodes, I understood something that I'd never understood before. What this show did with its female characters and the positions they put them in and the way life has put them and circumstance, and they're not victims, but just living in the world, the enormous physical and emotional empowerment of what wrestling could be for them is communicated to the audience. And all of a sudden, I'm in. I get it. I understood what was appealing about this world for these characters. The other thing about it is in an ensemble, there is such a deep respect for the humanity of these people. There are no bad guys. That seems like writing lesson 101, but that's just not the shortcut that most people take when they write something. And we have to give a lot of credit to Liz Flahive and Carly Mensch, who are playwrights who worked on Orange is the New Black, and you can see some of that DNA here in this. The third thing, the performances are killer.
Yeah, man.
Let me say something. Can I do a quick sidebar about Maron?
Sure.
Maron is great on this show.
Yeah.
Let me say a quick sidebar about Maron. I'm a huge Maron fan. I listen to his podcast regularly. His voice and his point of view is in my ears frequently. I'm sure I'm not the only person. I'm sure many of our listeners do that as well. My only interaction with him was when I gave a middling review of his IFC show, Maron, on Greenwald, and he tweeted something. He said I thought I was thinky or something. He thought it was a thinky review. I'm like, well, fair. But what I said in that piece was something I still believe, which is that you don't have to be good at everything. It's very rare to be really good, exceptionally good at one thing. And I talked about how I often fast forward through his 12-minute monologues in the podcast because the humanity and empathy that he shows in his interviews is so incredible. And that's enough. You don't also need to be a sitcom star. You know, it doesn't also have to be a TV show. If people give you the opportunity, you want to try it, you get paid, whatever. But he's really good at one thing, and I didn't think he was as good at the other thing. So I still believe that. But turns out he can be a really good actor.
Yeah.
He found something here. Obviously, the part appeals to him. But there is something actually about Alison Brie's performance, too, that reminds me of 70s cinema. Maybe that has more to do with the way they're shooting it and directing it. But they're just lived in, kind of.
Very much
and they're
so.
just feeling it, and they're very present.
They're very, very, very well cast.
So
and
well
Alison
cast.
Brie's opening scene in the pilot where she's auditioning for like a Dallas Knots Landing type
LA
show.
Law, yeah.
And she starts talking about how, it's really hard because they're, these parts like this aren't really written for women. And they were like, yeah, you're reading the man's part, and obviously, without reading too much into it, that is still the case.
Yeah.
And shows like this go a long way towards changing stuff like that. But in those scenes where they're all interacting with each other, these actresses who are playing wrestlers or wrestlers who are also acting, and they're all talking about what they have to do to just kind of make it in Los Angeles. It's just a great show, man. I really like it.
Think about the backflips for that character, the Ruth, her lead character. I mean, the character is a actor who talks about mask work and clowning.
Yes.
I know these
Strindberg,
people.
Yeah, right.
She sleeps with her best friend's husband. She is not a hero, She is And yet, through performance and through careful, empathetic writing, she is a completely realized human that you can feel for. Also, Betty Gilpin is a star. And, you know, this is one of those things where, like, give her the part. Give her the right part. Okay.
She's great on American Gods. She's awesome on this.
She says on her interview with Maron that she was not good at American Gods. She has a very funny anecdote about being on the set of American Gods. And everyone was, like, looking at the horizon going, ugh. And she was going, whoopsie doodle, like, what's that? Look, this show is going to run 5 or 7 years. And that might not be a good thing. But it's got all the parts and pieces.
Yeah,
and
man.
it's thrilling when you get to see it happen.
Way to go, television.
Good job, TV. You did it this week.
Again.
Good job by you, TV.
If you made it this far, please come see me, Andy, Jason Concepcion, and Mallory Rubin on July 11th at Largo for Talk the Thrones
don't
Live.
Don't come see us. Let us see you.
Yeah, exactly. You can find out information about how to buy tickets through our Twitter accounts, through the Watch Twitter account, through theringer.com. It's on SeatGeek. Just look up Largo, Game of Thrones. And we'll be back on Thursday
with a special guest.
And we will have a interview for next Monday on the July 4th weekend. Obviously, won't be doing a like of the moment show. We'll have a cool interview and a music pod where we just chat about some bands that we've been listening to.
We're going to do
make you a barbecue playlist.
Another barbecue playlist for all you Baranskis out there.
You guys are the best. You're not as good as David Lynch
or television, but you're still pretty good.
Peace.
Pretty good job, Baranski.
Today's episode of The Watch was brought to you by Spotify. Did you know that you can listen to The Watch and others from the Ringer fam on Spotify? Yes! The streaming service that you know and love for music is also fully loaded with podcasts. Find us in the podcast section within the Browse tab when you're using Spotify on mobile, or just search The Watch. While you're there, click to follow us, have new episodes delivered right into your Spotify library. Head to spotify.com/podcasts for more. Today's episode of The Watch was brought to you by Hotel Tonight. Things change, the weather changes, your mood changes. So why lock yourself into plans that might change? With Hotel Tonight, you don't have to, because you'll get incredible deals on awesome hotels, even at the last minute. Booking on Hotel Tonight gives you the freedom and flexibility to play things by ear while knowing you'll score a great price on a great place to stay. So download the Hotel Tonight app and find seriously amazing deals now.